Okay. So we are starting a new section of the Bhagavad Gita. 1 second. I just want to get my book. Yeah, so this is about samadhi and about working in, if we remember, we ended with Buddha Yoga, which was the same as Nishkam Karma Yoga, and that by working in that Buddha Yoga, one attains material detachment and gets eligible for the platform for liberation. So we heard in previous verses all about this idea of not, it's a theme that's, because remember this chapter, Prabhupada compares to like a table of contents. And so we hear a lot more about these things that we're hearing about in this chapter in subsequent chapters. But so much what we've heard is about being active, but in knowledge, and how that is better and easier than, there's 3 people in the waiting room. Should we let them in? Yeah. That is better than trying to go off and meditate and not do any work. And this is the theme that, is just going to come up again and again and again and again and again in the Bhagavad Gita. So don't be surprised by that. So text 54, Arjuna asks some questions. He says, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk?" And in the purport, Prabhupada talks about how you can judge a person by, or a person by their symptoms. He says a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, right? He's got a big house by the sea and he drives a Mercedes-Benz or something like that, and whatever. He spends 5 crores on his daughter's wedding, or, things like that. Right? A diseased man has his symptoms by which he's known as disease, right? He's entering the hospital, you look at his pale face. A learned person has his symptoms. And so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms. So Arjuna is asking, what are the symptoms by which you will know a stita pragya, one who's fixed in knowledge, one who's fixed in this Buddha Yoga. And Prabhupada says that the best way to judge somebody is when if they're Krishna conscious, is by their speech. He says what does he say? That it is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. So, and Prabhupada says that the immediate symptom of a Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only about subject matters about Krishna. So, in his commentary, which I'm bringing this up so that it may help us understand these verses a little bit better. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Arjuna's first question, how is one who is transcendently situated described? What are his characteristics? Yeah. So his first question, he says, is how is one who is transcendently situated described? What are his characteristics? And now Krishna is going to explain that. So in each of these questions that Krishna provides the external behavior, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur includes an internal behavior. So in 55, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Jadakaman Sarvan Partha Manogatam Atman Yeva Mana Tushta Stita Pragnas Tadochate. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction. Isn't that interesting? They arise from mental concoction. And when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Prabhupada writes that consequently, it is rightly said herein that one has to give up all kinds of sense desire manufactured by mental concoction. So what does that mean? Manufactured by mental concoction. Any ideas on that? And before it says, which arise, desires from sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction. Any thoughts on that?
It is more speculative about the meaning of this one rather than.
Yeah. Well, speculation is a good word. Thank you. Because our mind tells us so many things. We're going to like this oh, that's going to be great in the future. That's terrible. Or the mind often goes right to the worst possible scenario about the future, okay? Or the worst interpretation of what another person does. And you know, I'm going to be so happy, just like I remember as a child, oh, if I only get this present for my birthday, I'll be so happy. And after a week or two, it ends up, you know, on the shelf somewhere. I never look at it again. Right. So we are being constantly bombarded by mental concoctions. And we, you know, even, you know, when you think about it, we're a soul, we're a lover of Krishna. But our mind is saying, well, I like this political party or that political party, or I like this, or I like that. I don't like this. I don't like that. I like this sports person. I don't like. It's all a mental. You know, those political parties will not be around 1,000 years from now. We won't be around 40 years from now. It's all Akash push. It's just. Remember, we studied Nasato vidite bhavo na bhavo vidite sataha. That one meaning of reality, something that's real is something that's eternal, and something that's unreal is something that's temporary. And so one thing about mental concoction is just focusing on the temporary. Focusing on the temporary. That's here today, gone tomorrow. Even that person that you wanted to win the elections and such and such. I met a couple of times. What's his name? Bajpai, is that his name?
Yeah.
And who was like his right-hand man, the Home Secretary?
Lal Krishna Advani.
Yeah. And he read. I gave him books to read. He read them all. I gave him Vraja Prabhu's books. You know, he actually read them. But you know, they're not in charge of anything anymore. But they were, you know, and yeah, and that little baby that we thought was so cute, you know, when he was 6 months old is now, you know, a smelly 30-year-old. You know, make sure that he needs deodorant, you know, or whatever. So, you know, the mind concocts so many things. And therefore, Prabhupada says, therefore, one has to engage himself in Krishna consciousness without hesitation. For this devotional service will instantly help one onto the platform of transcendental consciousness. The highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Such a transcendently situated person has no sense desires resulting from petty materialism. That word petty. Petty means like, you get, do you think the rest of the world cares if you gratify your senses or not? It has some big impact on the world if, but we think it's so important, but it's petty. Rather, he remains always happy in his natural position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord. So he is detached from happiness and misery and fixed in his consciousness of himself. So now the next, in 56 and 57, Krishna answers Arjuna's second question, how does he speak? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this question means, how are his intelligence and words affected by another's affection, anger, or neutrality? So how does he react to other people? So 56. But did I read 55? Okay, I did. So 55, I remember, I promised I'd read the Sanskrit. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvam Partha Manogatan Atman Yeva Mana Tusho. I did read this. Sita Pragya Tadochite. Then 56. Dukesh Anud Vigna Mana Sukeshu Vigata Spriha Vitaraga Baya Kroda Sita Di Dear Munir Uchate. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called the sage of steady mind. Prabhupada writes towards the second half of the purport, such a fully Krishna conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries. Do we get what the threefold miseries? Anyone remember what they are? Or one of
Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, Adi Devika.
And what does that mean? Very good Sanskrit. What does it mean in English?
The problems within ourselves and the problems from the external factors and the problem from the natural disasters.
Okay, so natural disasters, our own mind and senses, and other living entities. Very good. So could you imagine being undisturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries? And rather accept all miseries as the mercy of the Lord, thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to his past misdeeds. And he sees that his miseries by the grace of the Lord are minimized to the lowest. And here Prabhupada is paraphrasing Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 8. But what often people do, and even sometimes as devotees, when we get disturbed by the modes of material nature, we look for some kind of escape. Maybe it's in eating a lot, maybe it's going shopping, or maybe it's, just spacing out or spacing out on the television. But we often look for some escapes from that, unfortunately. So here the idea is to take these and turn to Krishna, and find the right shelter, not the wrong shelter. And then Prabhupada says that then when we're happy, we should give credit to the Lord, thinking ourselves unworthy of the happiness. We realize that it is due only to the Lord's grace that we are in such a comfortable condition to be able to render better service. And for the service of the Lord, he is always daring and active, not influenced by attachment or aversion. Attachment means accepting things for one's own sense gratification, and detachment is the absence of such sensual attachment. So it's, and this theme comes up a lot in the purports. It's when we get a service, we don't think about the pleasure or the stress that it's going to cause us. We think of Krishna's pleasure. And so our accepting and rejecting, instead of based on what gives us pleasure, it's what gives Krishna pleasure. Okay. So any questions up till now?
In 55, in the translation, there is a sentence, finds satisfaction in the self alone. What is the meaning of the term? Self alone means what?
Well, in the self means not that the self is alone without anybody. It means in the self only rather than in the senses. And the self is the servant of Krishna, and the self has a relationship with the super self or Krishna. So 55.
You mean, Prabhu, understanding was oneself and his relationship with Krishna. Is it? Does it mean that, Prabhu?
What's that? Say that again, Prabhu.
Does it mean understanding oneself and his relationship with Krishna? This is what.
Yes. Yes, but the idea, but specifically, yes, the idea, the word is tushta. You see that, satisfied. So we look for, people look for satisfaction in the wrong places, and so we are guided to look to understand we are the soul. The soul is Krishna's servant. Therefore, my satisfaction should come from serving Krishna, and not from just engaging this world.
Okay. Okay.
Prabhuji?
Yes.
Yeah, Prabhuji, even in the purport, we see the same point Prabhupada is explaining 2.55. The last 4 lines he is mentioning, the highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Such a transcendently situated person has no sense desire resulting from petty materialism. Rather, he remains always happy in his natural position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Very helpful. Yes. Good. Now, that was what. Okay, so now we're on 57. Yas sarvatra nabhishnehas tat tat prapya subhashubham nabhinantati nadvesti tasya prajna pratishtita. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good you may, neither praising it. So this is that whole thing of being neutral to this world. Now, an example is given in 58. I don't know if anyone has ever been. How many of how many of you have been to Radha Kund? Okay. Now the question: how many of you seen the tortoises in Radha Kund? Yep. Yes, Rasika Ratika has. Yes, there's tortoises there, and they're swimming around, and they don't really bother anyone. But if you agitate the water a little bit, immediately their limbs go inside their shell. Immediately. So here, yada samharyate chayam kormom ganiva sarvasaha indriya nindriye yartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So I just such a great analogy or visualization, right? Because like I said, the tortoises, at least I've seen only in Radhika, they just go immediately like that. So that idea here is that's how we should try to control our senses. The test of a yogi, devotee, or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question of how the yogi is situated. And a little further, he never allows the senses to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots, and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. Best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up its senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purposes. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious person are used only for a particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. It's a beautiful example. Now, how to do that is, and this is one of the key verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so you should all know this verse. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam rasavarjam rasopyasya param dristva nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, so you try to control your senses and not engage in Maya, it doesn't mean the taste for sense objects has gone away. The taste for sense objects remains. So even if you keep away from it, you still have a desire for it. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So Prabhupada says, unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of edibles. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for edibles, right? You just wish, I can't wait until I get better so that I can again have chole bhature or whatever. Something that you're not supposed to really have when you're sick, right? This big fried thing or whatever, whatever, pizza. So you still want it, even though you don't take it for the temporarily while you're sick. So similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, etc., is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But for one who has, this is a beautiful sentence, but for one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness, no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. And then listen to this. One who is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. So this is a very practical verse. We should think of what are the things in Krishna consciousness that give us a higher taste. I mean, for everyone it's chanting, but for some people it may be kirtan, it may be japa, it may be reading the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, it may be cooking for Krishna, it may be sewing for the deities, it may be talking about Krishna with friends. Really try to think what gives me that higher taste, because that is what we need. We can actually pray to Krishna for a higher taste. Because when you're in good consciousness, you look at something for sense gratification, you just don't even think, oh, who wants that, right? But then you can look at the same thing when you're not in good consciousness, and it can look very attractive. You're the same person, you're the same soul. But when you have a higher taste, the material world automatically is not interested. You don't even have to work at it practically. But when we're not in good consciousness, then the same material world can look very attractive. So it's actually a very urgent matter, and to be regularly experiencing a higher taste in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so comments, questions, thoughts on that group of verses?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So all those verses, it seems to be easy, were very difficult. Lot of ideas covered. Like first of all, controlling the sense gratification senses. In one way, like nowadays, we are in such a situations, though we are having the devotee association, but going to different personalities, having the association with them, somehow or other, that affects our also sadhana. So one thing is being in such a situation, suppose going DC, metro, in the metro, having all those different malls, all like kind of, the five senses, whatever the attractive, even cherry blossoms, one sense, like all those good flowers are there. So automatically, one way we are desiring, another way we are not desiring, but somewhere or other it is coming, and we are also taking the taste. And one practical thing I felt like, if we are not engaging the mind, it is going distracted, like a mad elephant going here and there. Even thought also goes, lot of things, within a minute, so many things comes. So may like this way of suppose engaging in reading, serving Krishna, and so it's very slow process to control the thoughts. But like my one way is I'm trying to summarize the way has explained, really really helpful. But to what extent we can implement, because there are a lot of distractions. Maybe more the distractions, more we need to like more sadhana, or maybe more effort we need to put in order to pull from that situations and engage in that, which I feel difficult nowadays. But at least like we are going in a flow, like with association in the temple, whatever. So for those times we are little bit protected.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, my general suggestion is to really try to have a good morning program.
Yeah.
If our morning program is strong, that helps us throughout the day when we're busy with, with job or this, or taking care of children or this or that. That, Prabhupada would sometimes call like ISKCON sandwich, right? You good morning and good evening, hearing and chanting, and then in the day you do your various activities.
That's true, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Once like the chanting happens, or maybe good Bhagavatam class in the morning, that drags all the day. But in practicality, actually, Prabhupada, the way our family has designed the culture, like maybe one person's working and other person's maybe taking care, but we maybe with greed, definitely with greed and all those things, we need some satisfactions. We are struggling, here and there, we are just juggling.
Yeah, that's natural, but the morning program can really help fix the consciousness throughout the day. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. And one last thing. Yeah. So one who understands that, like one who has the knowledge of surrendering to Krishna and engaging the senses in service of the Krishna, is enjoys, or Prabhuji, like in 55 verse even mentioning, like satisfies himself within.
Satisfied, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, even with, if we'll pull our sense gratifications, like if we'll just control that, with that also we can be satisfied. Like as
Right.
we are seeing.
Right. Sense control alone doesn't satisfy the soul. Bhakti
Yeah. So
satisfies the soul. And
soul
so,
needs.
I mean, we do take vows when we are initiated to follow certain restrictions, but it becomes 1,000 times easier to follow those restrictions if we're engaging nicely in our sadhana.
Yeah, true. Okay.
So anything else on these verses? Okay, so 60 to 63, these 4 verses, they explain, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna how it's a dangerous plan to renounce work and go to the forest to gain knowledge and avoid sinful reactions in that way. So yatato hyapi kunteya purushasya vipaschitaha indriyani pramatini haranti prasabham manaha. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So the mind of a man of discrimination, that's the Jnani yogi, the Jnani, okay, here. So, and Prabhupada says, it is very difficult to control the mind and senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot cease material engagements. And then he says again, Krishna consciousness is such a transcendently nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious edibles. So same point being made again, but here he's even saying, even the Jnani gets in trouble. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matpara vasehi yasyandriyani tasya pragya pratishtaha. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control. So this is the contrast. One who restrains, keeping them, and fixes his consciousness on me is known as a man of steady intelligence. And again, Prabhupada says in the purport, the senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. So the same point being made again and again and again and again. And the key word here is matpara, in relationship with me. So this is actually the first time Krishna refers to himself as an object of devotion in the Bhagavad Gita. And he's stressing bhakti. This is the first verse that's really stressing bhakti. That we can only control our senses by engaging them in relationship with Krishna. So now, what if when we try to reach this stage, we fix our mind on the sense objects instead of Krishna's service? And then we learned a famous verse, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsang Sangasteshu Vijayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Grodho Vijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, the person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. So this is the downward spiral. Prabhupada writes, one who is not Krishna conscious in the beginning of the purport is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements. And if they are not engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. Same point again. A sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure to ultimately be to fail. For the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desire. So remember, Prabhu, the point being made here is to focus on Krishna. And if you find yourself that you made a mistake, you did this wrong, you focus on the sun, just say, okay, what's done is done. Let me again focus on Krishna. So it's always bring you back to Krishna, back to Krishna. It's not getting so absorbed in the sense objects and how I have to avoid them, but just Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So then it considers Krodho Bhavati Sammoha, Sammohat Smriti Bri Brahmaha, smriti brahmshad, bhudinasho, bhudinashat nashiti. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory, we forget we're Krishna's servant. When memory is bewildered, our intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So again in the purport, Prabhupada is saying the same thing again and again. By development of Krishna consciousness, right after that verse, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects and the jnanis. And as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain to the perfect stage of renunciation. Therefore, so-called renunciation is called falgu, or less important. That's what this verse that Prabhupada's quoting from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's talking about false renunciation and real renunciation. The next verse says, Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagi Uchite. Real renunciation is seeing everything in this world as Krishna's and using it in Krishna's service. Instead of renouncing it, have a cell phone to use it in Krishna's service. I'll read one more and then see if, oh no, I'll take questions or comments.
In verse 62.
Verse 62, yes.
In the explanation, while contemplating the objects of the senses, here does Lord refer to the relationship between oneself and other fellow human beings, or like wife or children, something like that? Or
it could be wife, it could be children, it could be samosas. It could be, as Prabhupada would joke or call it, just think about your five knowledge acquiring senses. So what pleases the eyes? What pleases the nose? What pleases the sense of touch? What pleases the ears? Did I miss one? What pleases the mouth? So all of the things that please those are part of sense gratification.
okay.
That makes sense. So it could be some boga, it could be some, maybe you like the music from the latest Bollywood or Tollywood movie, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Right, Prabhu? That makes sense. Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, then let's go on to 64. Raga Dvesha Vimuktais-2, Vishayan Indriyashcharan, Atma Vaishyayar Videhatma, Prasadham Avigachati. But a person free from all attachment and aversion, and able to control his senses through regulated principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So when, so there's two words, vairagya and viraktir. And this is, a little subtle, but vairagya means like avoiding the sense objects, and viraktir means by the higher taste, you're indifferent to them. It's just like doesn't interest you. You don't have like forcibly avoid them. It just disinterests you. So here we're hearing more like Viraktir. Person who is free from all attachment and aversion, able to control his senses through the regulated principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. Prabhupada writes so beautifully, the Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable. And if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or not act is within his control because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. So, prasade sarvatu kanam hanir ayos asyo vajayate prasana chetasa yasu buddhi par yavatishtate. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So those threefold miseries that we talked about before, when one is fixed, one just doesn't, one knows they're not their body, so the miseries and pleasures of the body, one feels detachment. One ego doesn't get affected by somebody talking badly about them or praising them. And one takes whatever natural disasters or natural things come, as like Prabhupada said, when the bombs were coming in Calcutta during the war, he said he just saw them as Krishna. Nashti buddhir ayuktasya na cha yuktasya bhavana na cha bhava yata shantir ashantasya kuto sukham. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Just 1 second.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, you're muted.
That was Bhurijan Prabhu, and he said to offer his respects and blessings to all of you. So I think some of you know Bhurijan Prabhu. He's a disciple of Prabhupada's. He's my Guru Maharaj. And close friend of His Holiness Chapter-2. So sorry about that, Prabhu, but you know, you get a call from your guru, you gotta like take it. Okay, did I read? did I read the purport? Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, no, I don't think I read that right. Oh, I haven't been watching the chat. Oh, okay. Oh, now you know why you weren't able to hear me. Okay. Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, one cannot have a final goal for the mind. What's your mind going to do? It's going to go all over the place. Imagine, how many of you know football or soccer, the sport? Right? You know that sport where they kick the ball?
Yes,
Right?
Prabhu.
Yeah. So our mind is like the soccer ball. Just imagine yourself being the ball. Forget about the players and everything. Just imagine yourself being the ball. Boing, boing, boing. Here, there, everywhere, all over the place. Sometimes out of bounds, sometimes in the goal, sometimes being kicked around for 20 minutes without any, and that's what our mind is like. There's no final goal for the mind unless we're Krishna conscious. Disturbance is due to want for an ultimate goal. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, or friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace, however much he may make a show of spiritual advancement in life. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition, which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. Whew. So, it's very clear what the message of these verses we're covering today, isn't it? So 67, Indriyanam hi charatam yan mano nu vidhiyate tad asya harati pragam vayur navdivambasi. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Have you ever had that experience?
Not the roaming senses.
Yes.
So we really, and luckily there's one cure, and that is chanting Hare Krishna. Lord Chaitanya made it easier than Krishna did. He is Krishna, but yes. Tasmad yasya mahabaho nigrihitani sarvasa indriyartedyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from the objects is certainly of steady intelligence. So again, the same point. 69. Ya nisha sarvabhutanam tasya jagharti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sanisha pasyato mune. I love this verse. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. And maybe, did I tell you about the time I was in Hong Kong at the temple? The temple doesn't have a place for devotees to stay. So I stayed in a guest house a few blocks away. And so Mangal Arati is at 4:30. So I would walk over there. And in between the temple and the guest house, there's a nightclub, a disco. And so at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:15, they close the disco and people are just coming out totally drunk and, totally intoxicated. And there I am with my tilak on and just take a cold shower and dhoti and kurta. And like this verse, it just came to my mind every day when I was walking to the temple for Mangal Arati. Right? There are two classes of men, one intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities for the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed, right? Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization, et cetera, et cetera. So even, I know it may be hard for some of you, but even as devotees, we try to go to bed early and get up early. And, like we said, my experience in India, people eat their dinner at 10 o'clock, 10:30, and it's a different program. They don't get up and go to Mangalarti. So it's a very nice way of explaining things. It's just like, day and night between, and I'm sure for many of us who became devotees a little later in life, we can see that in our own lives, that, the way we are now and the way we used to be is very, very different. I don't have so much of that because I joined when I was 17 or 16. So, I was a little younger, but, I can still relate to that. Very different life than previous. Yes, makes sense. Any questions or comments before we do the last verses?
In verses 64, Prabhu.
64.
64.
Yes.
Control his senses through regulative principles of freedom.
Freedom, isn't that a beautiful statement? Isn't that interesting? When you restrict yourself, you become free. Right? It's actually, you feel so, when you're following Krishna consciousness nicely, you feel quite light and free and no anxiety, and you're not controlled by the puppeteer of Maya. Right? Maya is like a puppeteer. You ever seen that picture? The three modes are like the three modes, and they're making your arms go up and down, and you're just being pushed around by the modes of material nature all the time. Right? But in Krishna consciousness, you cut those strings of the puppeteer of Maya, and you're rather in the loving embrace of Krishna. So the regulated principles actually give freedom, although it's counterintuitive. Like Prabhupada's godbrother, who told that viceroy, right, that can you make me a Brahmin? He said, yes, just follow these 4 principles. Impossible. What he said. So he was not free. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that. I also, when I first read the Gita many years ago, I said, what? The regular principle of freedom, they sound like they're really tough. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Anything else? I like the way you pick these points. It's very good.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Manaji.
Actually, it's a silly question, but I wanted to ask. All those, should we implement in our life, or to know and understand the reality and what is the fact? Because to be honest, it's difficult. I remember, like, during childhood, we had been asked, like, it's like ruch na ruch kha pita, bhuj na bhuj pod Gita. That means whether you understand or don't understand, just read Gita. So that way we used to read, but we never thought, like, we should implement. But here, like, to hard extent, but it's not possible to some extent, because if I'll think 1 or 2 verses, whatever the way, in the purport, only Goswami, like sort of Goswami, they might have reached that
No,
level.
you can do this. You can do this, Mataji. All of these things you can do. You're a soul. You're part and parcel of Krishna. You have your guru's blessings. All of these things are not theoretical. So we should read the Gita. It's like Radhanath Swami's joke. Do not make it Bhagavad Gita as it is, on the shelf as it is.
Yeah.
Don't
I
think
remember
that this is for somebody else.
Sorry, Praja, another one thing. Like, I remember, like, since 16, 17 years, we were into Krishna consciousness, though from the childhood, we used to have Radha Krishna temple, all those, but not having the understanding that now we got the opportunity. That depends to what extent we are, observing and, implementing. But somehow or other, when I used to hear, like, chanting is the most beautiful, chanting like nectar. So one time I asked my Sikhya Guru. Initially, I used to do chanting because in the Bhakti Vikya we will be asked how many rounds you are doing. If I remember 16, 17 years before. So that for that reason I was doing, but I never got the taste because I was feeling like I have to finish the round. And before few years, I asked my Sikhya Guru again, Prabhuji, people used to say we are getting so much nectar from the chanting. Is it a fact? Is it a reality? I'm not getting. But he gave me very good way to retrospect and reflect. If you, he mentioned me like if you see before 10 years and now definitely there will be some changes. From that day I really no like I felt yes there is something changed, and nowadays I feel the most beautiful activities in the day I feel chanting, and I love chanting whenever I'm happy, I'm distressed, whatever, I love chanting. So the point is if it took more than 10 years to get some taste and not maybe a whole taste of chanting, then how long it will take for implement to all those, or should I just know mercy of Krishna,
We
beg.
make gradual advancement. Prabhupada once said that it took me 30 years to get to the level of chanting I have when I came into America. So did I? Well, we should make advancement slowly, but constantly. And ultimately it's up to Krishna. We do our part and the rest is up to Krishna.
बट आप यही बोल रहे हैं कि ये जो सब मतलब भगवान कृष्णा ने बोले हैं
I know,
अर्जुन को
I
ये
just
सब
said
हम
it.
कर सकते हैं.
I spoke 2 words in Hindi and now you're speaking all the words that I don't understand.
Sorry, I thought I know. So you are giving assurance that yes, we can implement most of the things with mercy of Guru and
Yes,
Krishna.
yes,
Mhm.
no problem. That's why we're having this. It's meant to be a theory
Yeah.
or for somebody in Saffron. No, it's meant.
Yeah, we are just thinking, yeah, Maharaj people that they are in different level. So
But by their blessings, you can come to the same level.
yeah.
One time in New Vrindavan, any of you know the sweet called Simply Wonderful?
No.
It's just butter, powdered sugar.
Prabhuji,
Yeah.
What's that, Rasika?
milk powder and butter and sugar they grind and mix.
Yeah. So it's just something that a devotee made up, right? So they made these in New Vrindavan for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, "What do you call these?" He said, "They're very good," and he said, "They're simply wonderfuls." And Prabhupada, "You are simply wonderful." And then if you listen to the tape carefully, you hear under his breath, Prabhupada said, "You all become."
Yeah.
So it's meant for us. Okay, text number 70.
But Prabhu, just a minute, Prabhu. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Once again, interrupt you. The 69 still I am not clear, Prabhu.
Which one?
I still am on 69. And
Okay.
the time of awakening for all being is night for the introspective stage. Prabhuji, see, all human beings born in the world, they have to sleep for some time at night, wherever it is. And the only thing is, there will be difference in the time they sleep. A sage maybe sleep for say 3 hours or 4 hours, whereas a person, a karmi like me, will be sleeping for 8 hours. But sleep is sleep. But
this is not about sleep.
Time of awakening for all beings is, that means morning, daytime.
Yes.
Is the night for introspective stage. I don't understand, Prabhuji.
It's not, it's an analogy, it's a metaphor. So what it means is for the all beings, the latest movie, oh, I can't wait to see the latest Bollywood movie by so-and-so. And for a devotee, it's like, who cares? So that's like, they're really awakened and into that. And for the devotee, that's like nighttime. So it's an analogy. And for a devotee, they hear the conch shell blow and Artik and then Bhagavatam class, and they think that's nectar. And a non-devotee might think, oh, what a waste of time going to a temple and hearing some boring talk about God that doesn't exist, right? So that's what it means. It doesn't mean literally
Oh, it's not literally sleeping.
No, it's not literally sleeping. It's about, and Prabhupada mentions that in the purport. The introspective stage remains alert in the quote night of the materialistic man. It's about a sleep to self-realization, he says. Okay, but thank you for the question. Apurvyanam achala pratishtam samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sasantim apnoti nakama kami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy his desires. Prabhupada writes so beautifully a little in the middle of the purport, a Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of a river that flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities, and he's not even slightly disturbed by the desires for sense gratification. So the same point, just another analogy. Just like you go to Dwarka and that river, I forget the name of the river, it flows right into the ocean there, but the ocean's like not affected by that, even though it's quite a powerful river. The ocean's just so much bigger. Anyone know the name of that river in Dwarka?
But the ocean also is sometimes agitated, no, Prabhu. During
What's that,
monsoon
Prabhu?
time, the ocean is also agitated sometimes. During monsoon time, particularly, the ocean also is agitated. The waves are coming, and the big wave.
Yeah, but not because of the river. Maybe because of the typhoon.
True.
Yeah.
Not because of river.
Vihaya kaman yasarvam pumams charati nishpita nirmamo nirahankara sashantima vigachati. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So the same point. So desires for sense gratification, lives free from desires, given up sense of proprietorship, and is devoid of false ego. So proprietorship in Krishna consciousness, because you might say, wait a second, I'm not going to give up my car, or my house, or this. It means understanding for a devotee that these are things that I have and I use in Krishna's service. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, my dear Lord, this house is yours, and I'm like a dog outside protecting it. So we don't have to, literally go to, to Rishikesh or the Himalayas and give up everything. But we use our house in Krishna's service. We have deities or a picture of Krishna. We offer our food to Krishna. We invite people over and talk to them about Krishna. And we use our body, our mind, our intelligence, our words in Krishna's service. So that is the idea of proprietorship. But it's also, in the big picture, it's true. The Bible says, you come into the world with nothing and you leave the world with nothing. Right? But in the middle, we claim proprietorship for things. But the soul, So Prabhupada writes, to become desireless means to desire anything, means not to desire anything for sense gratification. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna conscious is actual desirelessness. To understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor of Krishna without falsely claiming this material body to be oneself and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. On the last verse, Esha Brahmis Titi Partha Naivam Praktya Nimuyati Stivasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Uchiti. This is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. One who is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So that's important for Arjuna to know, because he's in a battlefield, right? So there's a lot of death that's going to take place. So Krishna really glorifies this sthita prajna, this being fixed. So we heard so many topics in this chapter: the Vedas, the modes of material nature, karma yoga, karma kanda, Gyan, Sankhya, Buddha Yoga, Vedanta, the Atma, detachment, Samadhi, Sannyas, and Bhakti Yoga. Prabhupada writes, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as being the contents of the whole text. In Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has been given as the contents for the complete text. So we just finished the second longest chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So congratulations. And the homework is to let's see, read up to verse 20, chapter 3, and do the homework that's in the student handbook. Any last questions or comments?
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Navadvipa.
In the purport for the last shloka, Prabhupada writes something very, very important, which at times is actually very difficult for us to understand, because sometimes the Shastras may seem to have apparent contradictions. So here Prabhupada writes that one can attain Krishna consciousness or divine life at once, within a second, or one may not attain such a state of life even after millions of years. It is only a matter of understanding and accepting the fact. So my question is, for example, in Nectar of Devotions, we clearly understood the different levels of sadhakas, practitioners.
Right.
But here, even Lord Krishna and some of the shlokas that we read, Krishna, especially in chapter 4, where Krishna says that just understanding my eternal nature is sufficient for you to get entry into the spiritual world.
Right.
But the Nectar of Devotion specifically talks about how the ultimate objective is to reach that Krishna Prema stage. And we also recite it along when we talk about the 10 offenses and we talk about the Vaishnava Pranam. So the question is, on the one hand, there is indications in the Bhagavad Gita that just understanding the position of the Lord, understanding his transcendental nature is sufficient for you to get entry into the spiritual world. Is that a literal, or it is a figurative meaning, in the sense that you can experience the transcendental nature even here, or do we take that literally?
Well, the key word is understanding.
Right.
Right? Because, you can say, yes, I know Krishna's body is eternal. He has a peacock feather. He plays a flute. He wears a yellow dhoti. And so, hello. It's time to go home, right? But if you take understanding, means that you fully develop your Krishna prema, and you like that. Yes, because Krishna said, we'll study this in chapter 4, verse number 9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoga. But understand also that Prabhupada, as a perfect teacher, he sometimes will emphasize how to challenge us. Like, he'll say, if you're attached to one laddu in the material world, you have to come back. And another will say, if you just chant 16 rounds, follow 4 regular principles. So sometimes he's encouraging the student and sometimes challenging the student. And that's actually what a great teacher does. So it's not a contradiction. It's according, and of course here it's very specific. He's quoting Khatvanga Maharaj. So if you know that story of Khatvanga Maharaj, he had lived in the heavenly planets forever and ever and ever, and won a battle, and he got a boon. Okay, well, I just want to know when I'm going to die. And they did the calculation on their laptop and they said, well, very soon. And so he immediately came back to earth and, and surrendered and achieved perfection. So, and elsewhere, Prabhupada says that these are not exaggerations. They're not exaggerations, but they, we studied this. Do you remember we talked about this Nectar Devotion? It seems like a different lifetime ago. That they were exaggerations, but they were, depends on the situation. I can't remember exact words. Maybe we can find that for next week. But we specifically talked about this. And it's also said that although there are some exaggerations in the Vedas, it's an offense to consider any of the glorifications of the holy name to be exaggeration. That's one of the 10 offenses. But there's no exaggeration because Abhinapam Namanamino, the name and Krishna are the same. Okay.
So understanding here literally means realization of Krishna. You're saying understanding here is translated as Krishna Prema stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prabhuji,
Yes. Yes, Pooh.
it is related to mercy of Krishna and then sadhana bhakti. That is what the difference which is getting talked here.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, because there is also the does anyone know the singer Taylor Swift? So she's a famous singer here in America, and she never went to school to college, university, but she just got a what do they call it? A honorary degree from one of the top universities in America, I think from Yale. And so that's what Prabhupada calls what you're saying, Prabhu, like Krishna's mercy. Sometimes you get an honorary degree, but you can't sit at home and say, okay, I'm just waiting for an honorary degree, right? But the honorary degrees do exist. But our basic point is, of course, the practice of sadhana. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is good. We do
one more,
finish a little
sorry.
earlier than 10 o'clock my time. That's better for me because I can go to sleep and go to
I
Mangalore.
think Ramakrishna Prabhu is going to prevent you from going to sleep for another 2 minutes. He has a question.
Okay.
Prabhuji, sorry. This after reading this 71 sloka 71, I get it out, Prabhu. See, is there nothing wrong in owning our property or assets or accumulating wealth? But the only thing is, we should not have a feeling that we are the owner of all those things. They're all for property of Krishna, assets of Krishna, which you are using in his service. But there's nothing. But my question is, accumulating itself, is it wrong, or is accumulating without a feeling that it is not, I am not the owner, but it is only Lord is the owner, like that? That's what I want to.
If you accumulate too much, just give it to me, Prabhu.
Sorry?
I said if you accumulate too much, you can give it to me.
Sure. Yes, Prabhu. I don't distinguish between Lord and the spiritual master.
I'm just joking with you. I'm just joking with you. But the there's nothing wrong with getting. You're going to study this with Mataji in the Ishopanishad. That there's nothing wrong with getting our quota. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if we find that our endeavors to get more and more is affecting our Krishna consciousness, then we might want to consider if that endeavor is worth it. And generally people who are even very rich want more, even after they're very rich, as a general principle. So we just need to know what's important in life, Yeah, I think I told you before, I would like to accumulate some wealth because I want to retire soon and not just have enough so I don't have to worry and just do service without any, without any thought of, oh, I hope they give me a donation for my service or something like that, but just serve. So that's a practical consideration, but I have to be careful in my consciousness not to get so absorbed in what happened on, how much is the bank balance today and this and that, and then, forget Krishna. Because we just read, where was it? Somewhere we read that Krishna is the person who's providing for everyone. Yes, a Krishna conscious person is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. So these are practical. Most of the devotees here are householders. So it's a practical consideration. It depends on our individual natures also.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, everyone. Mancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripasinga.
Patidanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.